shows are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Welcome to the Edventures in Tech podcast, talking the latest tips and trends in educational technology to innovate and engage your students. Here are your hosts, Andrew and Dan.
Back and better than ever. Welcome to episode 48 of the Adventures in Tech podcast. I am Andrew.
And I am Dan.
And we are excited you have once again joined us for season 3 of the Adventures in Tech podcast. Of course, always help us out, provide feedback and a rating on wherever you download your podcast from. We greatly appreciate your support. Dan, it's been a long time. I mean, I talk to you every day, but
you do
not with a microphone.
I have to say, I'm very impressed at how you went through that initial read-through.
I'm a professional.
You are a professional.
I am a professional. That's what it comes down to.
I would have been
back and better than ever.
Oh, we're back.
I was gonna stumble. All right, next week I'm gonna say back and worse than ever. How about that?
Now next week will be fine.
Off the rails. Okay, already a minute in. All right, so let's recap. There has been a lot going on just since our close of our episode where we had some guests. With Art Schouten and John Redeker, big talk about AI, and it's amazing how much that have revolutionized since we last talked about that about 6 months ago.
Oh, it's a whole different world now.
And we are going to have an episode on that. That will probably be in the next few weeks. We'll get that episode out as well. Things that are happening. We just had the Hudson Valley NICE-Gate Conference, which was an excellent turnout. We had a great time with over 120 people, I believe, from districts across the Hudson Valley. So that was the first time. That was back for 6 years. For those that are listening, that will be occurring tentatively on Election Day every year in the coming years. Is that accurate?
As far as I know.
All right. Good. I got the same information that Dan. We read the memo.
So, yeah, that was just going back on it, it was a great event, kind of bring it, a little grassroots thing back to the Hudson Valley, people sharing, and it was great to network with people across the Hudson Valley. Especially,
being local. So that leads us into what's next is the NICE-Gate Annual Conference, which, of course, we are looking forward to. It is held in Rochester every year, and that will be kicking off with the student. The student session kicks off on Friday or Saturday with the STEAM Fest, and that will go through the Tuesday of the week of Thanksgiving. So we will be sure to have a ton of updates. We already know we'll be sponsored by Bloom Technology up there again, and we will have the podcast booth and get some of those keynote speakers on to see what is the hot topics in education overall, and that will be coming up as well. So, Dan, not a lot of classroom updates,
no,
to say the least.
Not a lot of class. I mean, there's a few things, and just say not a lot of class. Not that there isn't great things happening.
Correct.
It's just we've been otherwise occupied with
Exactly.
other things. But there's some good things on the horizon coming up, so we'll feel free to talk about that. And we spent a lot of time. You mentioned you left off with AI, and it really has been a world of difference. And there's a lot of good things happening with that in instruction that I've been seeing through our colleagues. So,
Absolutely.
I can't wait to get them on and start sharing some of that with people, looking at the practical applications of some of these tools. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're really just starting to peel back the layers of the onion of AI because, everything when it kicked off last November, December, right? It was early December with ChatGPT, and now you look at how many tools are standalones when it comes to AI, as well as how many educational tools have now built in AI into their platforms. And we can go through those, and there's so many. We have a couple in-services going on with AI, so lots going on. All right. A lot of Google updates. We're really going to try to touch base upon a few of them. The most recent ones, really, because the rest of it, I'm going to be honest, I think you probably have already experienced at this point.
Right.
There are a couple things that I didn't even put in our show notes. So one was, they added grading periods, which is very useful for grading, specific to dates in the quarter and making sure assignments line up with your SIS, of course, right?
The grade book, I'm glad they made that addition. It's been a long time coming. I think for the past 4 or 5 years or whatever, I've always hit that suggestion box and requested that they update. So I do like they have the filters. I still think they have a little way to go.
Yes.
They need to be able to filter the student view of the grade book.
Correct.
So for all you listening, hit that little question mark in the corner of your Google Classroom and make that suggestion. I think the more we put it out there, the quicker they will be to respond.
And they do, because if it's a simple fix, they will update it as soon as possible. If it's something, minute. If it's a major overhaul, it usually will happen prior to August when, the South and the West schools go back prior to the schools in the Northeast where we're located. A perfect example of this is when you recently went in, it would say checking assignment type on the bottom, and you can never see that student. So I think enough people had hit the question mark in the bottom, provided that feedback, and now it goes away. They figured out whatever the algorithm was that was messing that up. It is now away, and now you can see that student, as well as you scroll through your class. So that was a big thing. They added now whether you want proficiency scales, letter grades, or like a numeric scale with rubrics and everything. So they made some good updates that were major launches, I should say, for the start of the school year. The things that I want to talk about first when we talk about classroom is you look at classroom, analytics. And this just got released 2 days ago, November 7th. And what they're doing is they're now having analytics in Google Classroom, which are going to provide a centralized view of classroom data and insights for educators and education leaders. So now you're going to have direct visibility into student performance and engagement in the classroom. Mm-hmm. So if you use that extra extension where it used to pay for Classwork Zoom.
I was just thinking that.
Right? Same track of mind there, Dan. That's it. Including if assignments are being completed, how grades are trending, how the classroom features are being adopted, if they're using all those support tools. You now have that bird's eye view of insights with the ability to easily drill down further to identify which students, classes, schools may need support based on how they're doing, within the Google Classroom. Now, of course, this means you have to be utilizing Google Classroom to its full capabilities, but it is an option, nonetheless. So, and that, I believe, we have to make sure it's enabled. So your super admin has to make sure it's enabled. The gradual rollout for rapid release and scheduled release domains started November 7th, and you do need to have a Workspace for Education Plus license for that. So if you're a different level of Google Workspace, you may not have those insights as well. Speaking of which, for those that do have the access, that Visit a Classroom, Dan, that came out.
That's a game changer.
Game changer, right?
I mean, I know that doesn't affect many teachers
day to day,
but for those other tech integrators and coaches and who are so used to being part of about 45 Google Classrooms,
to say the least,
Google did introduce this year Visit a Class feature. So if you're listening and you are in that role and you would need that, you just have to make sure it's turned on by your admin. And put you into a group, and then you'd have the ability to visit a class.
Right, which can help when you're trying to provide remote support. So the next thing is, go ahead.
Oh, right. Not only remote support, but there's so many times we're embedded in the classroom and co-teaching with a teacher. You can get right in there and post the assignments. You can help evaluate work. You can do all these great things.
Right.
And it sends the teacher, when you visit, a nice little message.
Yep. So, they always get the email saying, hey, your friend is trying to support you. Got it. They're like, why are you bothering me and stalking me, is what they always say to us. But anyways, another good thing that came out this week with Google Workspace, they're now adding GIFs, not GIFs, GIFs and stickers right within Google Slides. So that kind of launched a couple days ago. GIFs and stickers are directly into Google Slides, so you no longer need to get them from wherever you are getting or creating your own, and that will empower you to build those visual, dynamic, and creative presentations that help you connect with your audience directly in Slides. It should automatically be on. There's no turn on by the admins in that regard. And if you want to add those GIFs to your slides, just create a new presentation or open one. Insert image just like you would for a picture, and you can add GIFs and stickers and search right in there, and you have several that you were able to insert into slides automatically from there. And it looks like there's a pretty robust amount, right? Whether it's a character or just, emojis, it's going to be helpful for that you can automatically put them in, and that should automatically be visible. If it's not, scheduled release domains, you may have to wait until after you gobble on November 28th.
But, I like the feature for the instructional design aspect of it. We always say when you're creating your digital learning spaces, you can really reach a lot of different learners with the way you design it, especially, we talked about it, but the principles of UDL, and then being able to design instruction for all learners in multiple ways. Using that, visual imagery will definitely help certain students learn. So being able to put in different stickers or GIFs, as we don't need, would definitely help some in the learning environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. From our good old friend Eric Kurtz, who we will hopefully be seeing next week, as he's usually presenting at the Google booth. Yep. He has a bunch of information. There are a bunch of events coming up besides the New York conference, NICEgate. You have FETSI that's going in January in Orlando. Dan, stop laughing. There is also TCEA, which is held in Austin, Texas. That's February 3rd through the 7th. The OETC, which is Ohio Educational Technology Conference, is February 13th through the 15th. And Michigan has their annual conference. It's called MACL, March 13th through the 15th as well. So a lot of EdTech conferences coming up. I believe the computer science one just passed, or that I don't know if that's actually been announced yet. But so a lot of things that are coming up in that regard for that. So the other thing is he also has, and we can post this in the show notes, Eric does a great overview of everything that comes out with Google every month. And he does have a meeting, and he records a bunch of webinars as well. So there are a ton of resources here with links that he has as far as what has come out in the last month or so. I mean, we could date you back all the way since our last episode, but we're not going to bore you. So in that regard.
So we have to remember to put the link to these documents. What's nice is Eric Kurtz curates all his resources and everything in Google Docs. That's always, updating. So I know that I put them in my Google Drive. I star it. So if I want to go back and see, hey, what's new going on, I can do it. So it's a great resource. And always kudos to Eric for being open and sharing everything he puts out there.
Yes, and we thank him. Amongst the others that are part of his group, Stephanie's in there and a bunch of others as well. So kudos to Eric. Control-Alt-Achieve, and hopefully we'll be able to touch base with him and his thoughts on AI. And I do want to talk about one of our frequent guests, good old Matt Miller.
Who's back in the classroom. Did you see that?
He is. So Matt Miller, if you're not familiar with Ditch That Textbook, Matt Miller, he is actually going back in the classroom, not for good. He's not Ditch That Textbook. He is basically doing a leave replacement in the second language. So he'll be teaching Spanish, and it's been years for him. I don't remember how many, 13?
Something, yeah.
So he had said it's been a number of years, so he's trying to he's doing what he does, but he's also coming up with ways of how is he going to start teaching these students, and I believe it's December or January. And, he shared, just for example, he was really looking at how to use ChatGPT in and it was actually today, with a choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
So he did the prompt, right? And we're going to post this, and it literally had the conversation, and he kept putting more information in. And as he put all this information in, right, with the choose your adventure, you choose one or two, it would then give you another adventure. It would build off automatically. Incredible. Just incredible.
Seeing how people are using it and their creative ideas, and no matter which AI platform, it's all going back to the same machine.
Yep.
But I've actually seen some cool things with a teacher and the students are doing like their narrative writing, and then putting that writing into the AI. In this case, it was Perplexity.
Yep.
And using the Copilot feature there, and like give me feedback and ask for specific feedback on the writing, whether it's the figurative language or whatever it is, and went through a whole deep dive into the student's own writing, and it was pretty cool to watch.
It was. It definitely was. All right, so I know we said we're going to talk about AI, and we're not going to do that today. I really want to talk
It's hard not to.
I know. It is. It is. There's so much going on, and it's just become such a resource for Dan and myself in everything that we do. I kind of wanted to touch base about our good old friend, A.J. Giuliani, right? And did you see this article that he wrote with 7 ways to assess the process, not the product? Because typically, what did we always do? You always look at the final product, not the process, right, Dan?
Where's that formative assessment?
Right.
We need that more.
Yeah. And it was interesting that, somebody had tweeted out, Derek Thompson, I can't say tweet, X'd out, posted.
You can say tweet.
Whatever it is.
Let's just say tweet.
All right.
Let's just not confuse.
Between 1890 and 1950, the average GPA at Harvard was 2.5. In 1960, it hit 3.0. Today, it's 3.8, right? So you look at the difference, and there was nowhere to go but up for Harvard students' average GPA. And what was the cause of that? Like what?
Yeah,
and it's not just Harvard.
Is this
so
grade inflation?
Gradeinflation.com at American colleges and universities. So this is an interesting article that shows how grades have been steadily improving every single year with some very, very big jumps. I look at between 1950 and 1970. Did you see how big that jump alone was? It was huge.
I'm looking at that right now.
Right? So you look at all of these recent GPA trends nationwide that four-year colleges and universities are showing. And, they're saying grade inflation, the role of standardized testing, right? Mm-hmm. So you compare all of these grades with the average SAT scores, which, was
GPA goes up, SAT goes down in the same period.
Right. Right? So isn't that interesting how they're saying that why it's so important and what is the K-12 system in higher ed based upon? Final product grades. Yeah. Right? We're looking at the final product. That's all we're looking at. What about the process of how the student got from point A to point F? Right?
Right. And, there's so much, I think, traditionally. I mean, it just goes through assessment. It's funny, I was just teaching about assessment Tuesday. Was that yesterday? Tuesday night to one of my classes, and we were breaking down differences between formative, summative, and performance assessments, and then how we use the digital tools in order to support those different types of assessments, and then where, what we can collect from that and how it can inform our instruction and what role should each one take. So it's very interesting that you bring up this article right now. I think traditionally everything is on that summative assessment.
Right. And that's what it is. Everybody looks at the final product, right? Whether you're building something on an assembly line or not. Right? Summative grades are given at the end of a test, end of a quiz, end of a unit, end of a project, end of an essay, right? For the report card, right? While grades keep rising, it's hard to show the data of whether or not real learning is occurring. And that usually happens during the actual process, not the final product.
Well, true. And, the summative assessments, it depends on what way that they're they're delivered to students. But that traditional multiple choice test or essay,
correct,
is giving a snapshot of a certain thing at a certain moment and whatever. Was the kid trained on how to take that test? Are they remembering? Are they understanding? Is that grade even valid? There's so many things to consider it. But when you look at some of the other types of assessment, that formative assessment, that low stakes, that ungraded, that reflective piece that goes into it, and more for the teacher to take those assessments to inform their instruction to see where students are and where they need to be, I think needs to have a little bit more emphasis. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a summative assessment.
No, it's needed. I'm not saying to remove it.
If we think about designing our instruction and what we're looking for in terms of assessment, I think one thing to take away is when you're done teaching something, whether it's a lesson or a unit or whatever it is, I think it's first important to identify what do students need to understand. All right.
Well, that's your backwards by design.
Well, it's your backwards by design, and understand, and then figure out, well, how can they show they understand it? Right. I think that's where you think about performance assessments. That's where we can start weaving in things like PBL, design thinking, more student choice, and giving opportunities to demonstrate their understanding of a topic. So if you've identified what they need to understand, then you can figure out a way for them to demonstrate it. Well, how are they going to demonstrate it? Well, there's probably some driving questions or essential questions that are necessary to demonstrate those understandings. So those things, you would go through, and those answering to those essential questions or those ideas, that's a good point for summative assessment. Like, right. Are they grasping that? And then you think do I know if they're grasping it? Well, that's where your formative assessment comes in. So I think going through that backwards and thinking of the role of each type of assessment, I think would maybe be an interesting way to approach the grading of students.
Yes, and there's been a I don't want to say a seismic shift because it's not seismic yet, but there's been a shift with schools when they start to look at the role of project-based learning, design sprints, and other inquiry-based learning experience that are not so easily assessed as multiple choice test quizzes and those 5-paragraph essays or whatever it is. And how do you do that through the process, right? Mm-hmm. So AJ's article goes on to discuss how you can assess the process and not the product. And I will say, you talk about number one, right? The GRIT rubric.
I was just had that open.
Right? So, what is interesting, so the GRIT rubric is developed by College Track, right? So I know this is going to lend itself to more of our secondary students that we're, or higher ed that we're talking about. But the GRIT rubric assesses students on the process and not the final product by measuring their guts, resiliency, integrity, and tenacity while working on the project. So it's not the end. It's how do you get to the end? And that's what it kind of starts to look at. And if it meets, if you're thinking about what you would do, like if you were a student in this kind of project, think about it for a moment. Yeah, that's exactly what I do. But you're going to create that project that meets those specs and guidelines, hand in something I knew that's going to get a high grade on the rubric. And then you'd have probably 20 of the same project or similar, I should say. Mm-hmm. I think of even my daughter in 6th grade. She just had a book report project, which was a cereal box. Now, I know we teach our kids independence, and I would have gone a completely different way. And if you have anything near an 11 or 12-year-old daughter, whatever I say doesn't matter. Even if I think I know what I'm talking about, there's no way, no shot that I have any chance of reaching her because, that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. I had a different recipe, and my recipe went straight in the garbage, so I just shut my mouth and sat on my hands. But this would have been something where it would have been, now, obviously the teacher didn't do a lot of it in school. I could see what the process was. The teacher couldn't because all they cared about was the end project.
Right, and that kind of goes to like your instructional design and how you're thinking about your learning spaces. So in that regard, what happened is in class, the teacher spent most of the time, like I'm just going to say, most of the time just going over stuff. Like
traditional
way. But then the student is outside of the class where all the higher level thinking is going on. So like flipping that paradigm. I go back. We say flip classroom, but it's. I think that term is dated right now.
It is dated.
I think it's just flipping the instructional paradigm. Like, what can you do in a digital space that will give you more time in the physical space? So, like, some of that direct instruction or whatever it was could be put in a digital space. It could be put in a flip video. It could be put in different station work. It can be put somewhere so the teacher's not spending 15, 20, 30 minutes giving that direct instruction, dealing with all the headaches and everything that goes along with it, putting that in a digital space in a more creative way, and then allowing more of that project and that work that the student was doing at home with you to take place in the class, where the teacher can then have work in small groups and have small conferences and then provide the scaffolds they need. Look at the formative, just a quick exit ticket or entrance ticket when they come in. Students are working, the teacher can look at it really quickly, gather data, and form instruction, maybe stop for a short mini lesson or do something and keep all kids engaged.
And that process that you just described just lends itself to present so many more opportunities for feedback to actually assess the process.
Right.
There are way too many times when we're talking about, student learning and whether it's standardized testing or any kind of final product, how else can we assess the process to really show growth in how a student is thinking? How did they come to an answer? Screencasting, this is another thing AJ talks about. Screencasting your thinking and your doing, right? So, if imagine getting a sheet. This is a perfect example he gives with 30 math problems solved and with the steps. 10 years ago, this would show the thinking and work. But now, between PhotoMath and ChatGPT and everything else, that can all be AI generated. All of it.
Absolutely.
So if you enter screencasting, right? Because, Alexa, right? You can ask Alexa the answer. Sorry, everybody.
You did it again.
I did it.
Did it again.
Okay, well, Google it then.
Hey, Google.
Right? But what I'm saying is if the students screencast 2 to 3 problems, you're going to get a quick snapshot knowing if they know the process. They're talking through their learning process. They're demonstrating their work. If they're struggling, you're going to be able to see what step of the math problem they are struggling at. And by hearing and seeing it, the student learning in action, it's not in front of you, could be at home, right? you're able to assess where they are at, where your whole class is at, way more accurately than you're seeing only the final product that is a piece of paper.
And it's not a heavy lift anymore. I mean, years ago...
Three problems.
But years ago to set up a screencast was a heavy lift.
Fair point.
It's not now. Tools like Flip...
which we didn't even talk about. But yes, Flip, Screencastify, all of them.
You can use Screencastify.
Google Meet. They can record their own.
Yeah, I mean, but just setting up a Flip and having students go in, you can do screencasting in there. They can talk about it. You can hear it. You can focus on metacognition. Also, Padlet.
Right.
Padlet now. I mean, because we're going to have to find an alternative for Jamboard. We'll get there.
That's another whole episode. Fig Jam.
Pour a little out for...
I'll put an asterisk on that. No more Jamboard.
But yeah, and that, Flip it. You take that screencasting to another level, video annotations on work. So it's great with the Google platform how you can go in and collaborate on work. But as AJ brings up, you can use those screencasting or those video annotations on any work that a student is putting in.
Yeah.
So you can go in, open up the document, put a little screencast, talk to them. Or even, you could use video annotations, but then there's our favorite. I'm looking at the sticker right here. Type less, talk more. We can use Moat. Voice comments are built right into everything on the Google platform, everything on the web, using that audio feedback.
Yeah, and I understand that the gift of time for teachers is monumental. And I know we've had the discussion in the past about how can I, many times they'll go search certain websites for an activity, or they're searching for something when maybe, just maybe in the same time, that same activity could have been created a lot easier using your digital tools and your space. And now that time has now tenfold increased where, you can create these process rubrics, any of your conference, your prompting, your activities. I'm shocked at how much AI, I shouldn't be shocked, but I am, and how much it has revolutionized as a time saver, in this, because he even says ChatGPT, and that, has been fantastic creating different types of process rubrics. It puts it in a table for you. Like, you talk about the ultimate time saver for teachers. I don't know what else would be there with AI. I don't.
And the thing about it with a lot of these tools, whether you're going to ChatGPT, we'll talk
any
about
of them, yeah.
EduAid, with Magic School, it's all the same basic. You're going back to the same place. It's just whatever input you're putting it through to get back to those places. But being able to understand and how to work with yourself and your ideas and the AI is just amazing. So you talk about the time saver, even you're saying going around, trying to plan nuts to bolts, full unit plans and lesson plans completely on your own is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I'm a creative guy. I'm not that creative. I don't have all the ideas. Sometimes when I'm sitting with Andrew, we have these great ideas that I wouldn't get to.
And then we forget.
But sometimes I want someone to bounce some things off of or ask for. AI is there for it. I can take it. I'm like, I want, 4 learning stations for this. What can I include? That includes multimedia. That includes this. That I want students to write to this prompt. The more specific and the more I follow up, it starts creating these things with me. And I don't want to say for me, with me. And it's so much better, I find, because going out and trying to find stuff that's already there that you have to, what your students, what you want, you can create with AI. And I think that's something we have to get apart to our students and how we use it in the classroom. It's more create with than do for.
1,000% agreed. And I know people may right now be pushing back saying, well, I like to create and collaborate with my colleagues. 100% agree. That's what Dan and I do. But what I'm saying is, let AI start to give you that spark, that jump, and then put it into a Google Doc or wherever you want to and start sharing it, and then start, editing and tweaking and sharing. We could share Matt's chat with AI. You can share the chat with your colleague, and then they can see what they need to do to add things as well. I think there's just a lot of opportunities, and it's your fear of the unknown, so to speak, I think is part of it. But it's not going away. I think Matt, and I think back to Matt all the time, is we have to pivot just like we have in the past, because the graphing calculator didn't go away. The regular calculator, when it came upon us, think of, I'm trying to think, what were they? They weren't, what were those things we used to do, those adventures? It wasn't a hyperdoc, pre-hyperdoc.
WebQuest?
WebQuest, thank you. See? This is
Show
Dan's
my
the
age.
repository of his age there, right? But it was a WebQuest, right? Like, think how far things have come since the WebQuest,
Oh my gosh.
right?
Also,
I mean,
on the flip side, some people are still.
anyways, moving on.
But yeah, it's.
But right, things have completely revolutionized in a way that I don't think, and we've said this many times, with what AI is able to do to assist you with your work, corporate America or education, it doesn't matter. Preparing our students for college and career readiness and being able to, there's no doubt in my mind that any employer that they're going to end up meeting with is going to have a conversation on what are your thoughts on AI, or how can you use AI to help you in your job.
Right. And, we're talking about this whole, I mean, I don't think we're off the rails quite yet.
No.
We're headed
we'll
that
wrap
way.
it up.
We're headed that way. But when we're looking at, the process and not the product, it's a big dynamic shift.
It is.
It is. And it's not easy. And I said, doing it on your own and wanting because everyone wants, I mean, it's not like somebody doesn't want this to be happening. It's just, how do I get it done? I'm constricted by time periods. I have this. But your digital design can help you. And if you're not sure how to do it, that's where some of these AI tools can come in. Like, I need a 4-station rotation that's going to focus on this skill, presenting information in this way for a 30-minute time period.
Boom.
And then it'll give you something. And then you can ask it more questions.
Gives you the skeleton.
And then you can ask more and delve deeper. And then it'll spark your own thought. And then before you know it, you've developed everything and you just put it into the digital space.
Done.
And you're off to the races. Now you're not planning day to day. You have everything set up.
Right. So I know we talk process and product still with AJ Giuliani. So number 5, because we're going to start to wrap up because we could go on for a while. But failing reports, and the big thing he mentioned is, the 20% Genius Hour project, right? Which, was a huge thing. It was the buzzword, let's say, along with flipped learning right before COVID hit, and then everything kind of changed. But, he had a bunch of different things. He had something called an epic failure board, right? Which they would pin up some of their biggest fails and their epic risks, and then they would end up challenging themselves and learning, creating with a purpose, having lofty expectations and goal. And failure is going to come at every step. But you know what? They gave that 100% effort. So definitely sometimes you win and sometimes you learn, right? So that is definitely a definition of failure. That's a mantra that he mentioned in here that I thought was great, right? It's not about losing, it's your learning. So I thought that was great. I know you'll want to talk about the Shark Tank.
I love it because it just goes back to kind of what you went back. What it started with, like screencasting your thinking, right? Going in benchmark Shark Tank presentation. So like that's not necessarily like a Shark Tank. Like you've gone through a unit or project and then you come up with an idea. But if you put like these Shark Tank quick like 5-minute elevator pitch presentations as benchmarks throughout something that you're studying, I think that is a great time for students to reflect and to demonstrate again what they know. It's all becoming assessing the process. This is where I'm at. I know I need to get here. This is where I need to be, and go from there.
One of the things that he does wrap up with number 7, which, we really can't delve into it today.
That's a whole other.
But I think we can talk about it, and we'll put it on an upcoming episode, is portfolios. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say much about it because
I can't.
There's a lot. That's a long conversation, and Dan may go off the rails with that. But seriously, that could be honestly the best way of assessing the process is through a portfolio, right? And there is many different portfolios. You can read it on your own. We'll post the link, but we will also have a at-length discussion. Maybe we'll bring Art and John back for that conversation as well. When it talks about portfolios, I don't want to get back. I don't want to dive into that because then we'll be no. So let's talk.
We're already 34 minutes in.
Yeah, we're going to talk closing thoughts now. We know, right, that. And AJ says this isn't easy. I think we've kind of made that throughout, right? It's not easy. It's easy to do, in the words of our good friend, Mr. Rediker, that's the way it's always been done, right? It's easier to give a multiple choice test, grade the answers, move on, next. And this isn't perfect. It's not going to be perfect day one. It's probably not going to be perfect year 2, year 3. You're going to be constantly evolving, adapting, and changing things because assessing a learning process can be very subjective. It's very human. Conversations have to happen, and continuum is going to look different every day. But in the long run, it is worth it.
For sure.
We know the world of AI. These students have so many tools at their fingertips to help them showcase those amazing final products.
I'm just going to go here. When you're actually watching a classroom and students being more involved in their own decision making,
right?
And going through different processes,
student agency at its finest,
and own it. It's amazing to see the growth that starts happening, and it's just something that once you see it and you're a part of it, you just want to have it all the time. So it's a lot of prep work, and it's a lot of mind shift.
And we've said that for years with a lot of different things, but having AI as a tutor, for lack of a better term,
Sure.
or an assistant, right, is monumental in helping to recapture some of that time so then you can put this energy into the process and not worrying just about the product.
Right. And I think that's what teachers want, because I think teachers want the process. That's why we're all in the game. Like that's
absolutely.
And we just get so confined by certain different things, a 40-minute bell schedule, this in the curriculum. And it makes it
always something. The bell ringing, a fire drill.
It's scary. It's like you have a big responsibility. But digital design and then these tools that are out there and how you can craft them to help you can really transform that 40-minute period that you have in your students into more of a process-based thing without sacrificing any of the content that you think you would be.
Right.
So it's really neat to see.
If I can leave with one thought and challenge everybody, all of our listeners, try to not only provide meaningful learning opportunities, which you do every day just by being an educator, but also relevant ways. Come up with a relevant way to assess the process and not just the final product. Just one. Start small. We always say, don't bite off more than you can chew. Start small. Try one different way, one idea, one AI use that's going to revolutionize and change something that you've done in the past to make your instruction pedagogy a better process for your students this year. Try in one class, not 5, right? One content area, doesn't matter. So try that. All right, Dan, any final thoughts?
No, it's just nice to be back.
Nice to be back.
I hope people didn't forget about us and they still tune in.
Possibly.
They might have tuned out already.
All right, once again, thank you for your support. Listen on all the platforms, leaving us those reviews. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, please reach out on X, a.k.a. Twitter. Tech hard, work smart, live an adventure.
Find Andrew on all socials at A Nicola Tech and Dan at WCSD Tech DR.